I had a couple people be like, oh, I thought these were funny and I liked them. And then my feed filled up with like insane Nazi stuff.
On September 10th, 2025, Charlie Kirk was shot to death in front of a crowd of students in Utah. Just a week and a half later, a massive rally and memorial was held in his honor at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. The event was attended by over 90,000 people, and Donald Trump, JD Vance, Marco Rubio, and a slew of other high-profile political and media figures praised Kirk and framed his death as the start of a holy war. They claimed that his killing would result in millions of Charlie Kirks.
Get married, have 1 million kids, and live out your American dream. And by doing that, we can create millions and millions and millions of Charlie Kirks, and we can save our land.
Now, I believe with the assassination, with the heinous murder of Charlie Kirk, that millions of Charlie Kirks were created today. That today will be a never forget kind of day.
Almost immediately, mini-me Charlie Kirk clones began cropping up, and far-right Gen Z influencers began attempting to mimic Charlie's viral debate formats. The far-right also began cracking down on online speech. At least 600 Americans lost their jobs for saying stuff about Charlie Kirk online, including 50 academic administrators. By contrast, just 22 academics were fired in 2020 for Black Lives Matter commentary, and 160 total for pro-Palestine views, meaning the crackdown over Charlie Kirk was the most extreme form of cancel culture we've ever witnessed. Content creators like Asmongold claimed, quote, "This will radicalize a generation." And conservatives for weeks continued to push this idea that Charlie's death would be avenged. But pretty soon, things went off the rails. Hardly a month after Charlie died, his widow, Erika Kirk, was pictured giving an awkwardly close embrace to JD Vance in skin-tight pleather pants. Donald Trump pretty much all but forgot about Charlie Kirk, and very quickly, Charlie became a meme. Ryan Broderick is an online culture journalist, and he's been covering the Great Kirkification. Today, he's joining me to talk about the rise of Charlie Kirk slop and what it's morphing into. Because as fun as it is to laugh at all the absurd memes featuring Charlie Kirk's face plastered onto like some mpreg emoji or whatever, lately the whole thing has taken a sharp turn, and it's now funneling a lot of people right back into the far right. We're going to dig into this new hyper-online esoteric form of Nazism, explain the lore behind the mythical city of Agartha. You might have seen these edits of Charlie Kirk flying behind Alex Jones on TikTok or Instagram Reels lately. And we're going to explain what all of this says about the current state of the internet, politics, and culture. Hi, Ryan. Welcome to Power User Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, so I want to kind of dive back for people that might have been seeing these Charlie Kirk memes on their timeline, but can't really remember. I feel like we all entered in such a fugue state this fall, like how this all began. When did this sort of like Kirkification begin? When did things move from memorializing, eulogizing Charlie Kirk to memeing him? How did that all start?
I was surprised to find out that it happened pretty much immediately. Best as I can tell, like within a week of his death, there were memes about him. These early memes were not exactly making fun of him. They were being passed around, particularly people in like the cryptocurrency world who were making like AI generated videos about what if Charlie Kirk was brought back as the Terminator. A lot of these are super racist. And the idea was sort of to venerate him while also playing with it and having fun with it. And then we've just sort of seen these memes kind of devolve over the last couple months.
Some people were, of course, memeing the day of, and like the hashtag Charlie squirt, and like some of the content then was out there. And then like there was this sort of crackdown and policing of social media. People were potentially getting fired from their jobs. I feel like it pulled back. And you saw a lot of AI slop that wasn't necessarily intentionally memeing him, but like the one where he ascends with the flag of Israel around him to God or whatever. That was sort of like, I feel like it ended up as an ironic meme by people on the left, but it wasn't necessarily intended that way. And I feel like that sort of seems to be a lot of this stuff. Like even the We Are Charlie Kirk song, which went viral, it seems like it started off as serious and then sort of got twisted. So can you talk through kind of like the evolution of just in the first month, like how the memification of Charlie Kirk kind of progressed?
Yeah. So what you're describing, that kind of confusing, like, is this supposed to be serious or not thing. What that is there is a massive chunk of what we would call normies who are super, super conservative and far right now. MAGA is effectively mainstream. And there's a lot of boomer MAGA accounts that make AI generated slop for MAGA boomers. And more sophisticated, more intellectual people on the far right, younger people, they find this very embarrassing. And so if you're on the outside looking in, it's actually very hard to tell what is ironically or genuinely being shared by these different right-wing factions. And a huge chunk of these young people hated Charlie Kirk because Charlie Kirk was embarrassing. Charlie Kirk was a sellout. Charlie Kirk was the Gen Z, the younger kind of person who sold out to them. So when he died, it kind of became a free-for-all. And you can see this interplay if you look really closely, but like from the outside, it looks ridiculous. Like it all just looks like garbage slop. But there are different people sharing this stuff for different reasons.
Well, let's kind of break down those different factions of like the fandom and the, I wouldn't even say anti-fandom, but maybe the haters. Like, I feel like you have the mainstream Charlie Kirk fans that, like you said, are maybe the authentic audience for the most cringe sort of slop out there, which are like the boomers, basically. And then you have the leftists where everything is sort of ironic. And obviously they hate Charlie Kirk because he was like a right-wing extremist. But talk about this other group, because I remember, I mean, in the aftermath of his killing, I feel like a lot of people, including the New York Times, like learned the word groiper for the first time and weren't even aware of sort of like the groiper wars. So can you sort of fill people in on that lore and the different factions within the young conservative right?
Yeah. So let's break it down, right? So we've got MAGA as the new mainstream Republican Party. For all, intents and purposes, they are the boomers. They are the old guard now. I mean, MAGA has been going on for almost 15 years at this point, 10 years, right? So they are seen as old and out of touch. And you have these younger Gen Z extremists. They're called groipers. Their name comes from like an obese Pepe the Frog meme. And their de facto leader is a Holocaust denying live streamer named Nicholas Fuentes. They aren't really as prevalent as they used to be as Nick Fuentes has become more popular, but their attitudes have spread. They're extremely xenophobic. They're extremely isolationist. They don't want any American military presence outside of the US. They believe in eugenics. They believe in no voting rights for women. They don't really believe in anything, actually, in a way. Like they are, I wouldn't say nihilistic, but they are the total race to the bottom end result of a decade under Trump's thumb. And they believe that Trump is being held back from being more extreme. And they hated Charlie Kirk to the point where they would show up and they would heckle him in real life, to the point where the shooter was believed to have been a groiper initially by the FBI or by certain journalists. It's a little uncomfortable to say this, but they have a sense of humor that is very irony based in the same way a lot of hardcore leftists are. And they're aware of this. And so they'll insert like super, niche neo-Nazi imagery or references into their stuff, hoping that it's ironically shared by leftists, spread by people who don't know what they're talking about. And they really just want to dogpile any trending topic. And Charlie Kirk's death was the biggest trending topic of the year. Let's
like kind of explain, I guess, like the different types of memes that have arisen, like in the sort of Kirkification, because I feel like we've seen stuff evolve, like actually towards more of those extreme spaces, like more of the content today. I think the meme content about Charlie Kirk today fits in line with the stuff that you're just talking about versus sort of what it was before. So right after Charlie died and like the memes that were posted at that point, when do you think that meme culture evolved to kind of become dominated mostly by these like hyper online like extremists?
So the Charlie Kirk Terminator stuff was definitely the first one. It's like an AI generated web series about what if Charlie Kirk was brought back as a cyborg and then him and Hitler, Alex Jones, like traveled around the world beating up black people and liberals and stuff. And it's promoted by a lot of cryptocurrency people, and it's been kicking around since September. So that's like the first big one. Then you also have leftists that are trying to push exactly how offensive they can be about Charlie Kirk. And this dovetailed with the Trump administration really going all in on revering Charlie Kirk as a martyr. So as Trump became more hysterical about Charlie Kirk's death and how we should all honor it, the more it became a taboo that people could sort of start to manipulate or play with. And so this is where you start to see people using Kirkin on it as a euphemism for oral sex because he's the throat goat. This is where you start to see the kind of like out for Harambe style absurdist dark humor about Charlie Kirk's death. I saw a conspiracy theory being passed around ironically that he didn't die, his neck just did that. Like there's all this kind of stuff circulating. And this is happening like late September, early October. And as this is happening in the background, a lot of AI generated accounts targeting conservative boomers are making insane AI slop about Charlie Kirk. This is also showing up in like mega churches where Charlie Kirk is like being AI generated into a video where he's talking to Jesus. And as these accounts become more popular, people start discovering more and more surreal, weird, AI generated, genuinely shared Kirk content. All of this starts to collide last month, basically. And this is where you get, you know, the AI face swaps of Charlie Kirk, the deep fakes where they're taking his face and they're putting it onto like rappers and famous memes.
Yeah. How did that start? Because I feel like suddenly every single face that you started to see on the internet was replaced with Charlie Kirk.
I can tell you how it started because I reached out to the person who started it and they ghosted me and I'm very mad about it. So right now they're going by Money Spread. They're an account on X that just makes tons and tons of these. And I did reach out to them and they talked to me very briefly and I asked them like, what are your political views? And they completely ghosted me, which I don't really know what to make of that. It could be that they are a groyper and they thought it was funny. It could also be that they just don't care at all. And they realized that like it was pissing people off or making people laugh and they kept doing it. And then that has spread. And then as that's spreading, we have a ton of Charlie Kirk, like groyper slop spreading around TikTok. So this is the stuff that we can go further into about like Agartha and Hyperborea. And then we also have the AI generated song, We Are Charlie Kirk, which goes viral after it's already gone viral among conservatives. So basically like apolitical posters and leftists and liberals discover that it's so popular on Spotify, and then that goes viral in its own way. So now there's tons of remixes. And so it's basically like all these different corners of the internet are making fun of Charlie Kirk and making fun of the martyr status that was sort of imposed upon him by the administration. And the point that I've tried to make in a couple different pieces, including one in the Rolling Stone, is that Trump has always sort of succeeded by not having standards, by not respecting anything, by not really caring, by being this sort of cultural wrecking ball. And that veneer kind of broke in September. Because suddenly they're making us do like flags at half mast for him and there's, you know, televised funerals for him and all this stuff. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Like if the administration cares about something, that means that we can bother them. We can mess with them. We can troll them. And that is a first, actually. Like, it's kind of amazing to find like the one red line for Trumpists. And now that people have found it, both leftists and extreme right-wing people, extreme far-right people are triggering MAGA that way. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind of also just like seems like so the opposite of what people were claiming in the wake of Kirk's death when there was the big, you know, rally in Arizona and they're like, well, we're going to have 1 million Charlie Kirks. And like you've started this movement, or you had the MAGA bombs being like, I'm raising my lions, you know, to stand up to the woke culture. And it seems like it just sort of backfired on them.
I think it absolutely backfired on them. And historically it does. I mean, you don't even have to go that far back in history, but like, you know, the guy who built a contraption to kill the prime minister of Japan, and then his party apologized for their connections to like a scam church, like Luigi Mangione, like political violence does have typically, I don't want to say it gets results, but like it does impact how people talk about stuff and think about stuff. And I think the far right and the right wing in the MAGA world were very naive to imagine that there would just be like a ton of people wanting to line up and become the next Charlie Kirk and literally be put in the crosshairs. Like I think it has had a really chilling effect on certain parts of the MAGA world.
Yeah, it feels like also very quickly it just made the MAGA world seem very corny and boomer and out of touch and lame.
It is fascinating to me that like the biggest impact of Charlie Kirk's death is that everyone around Trump looks like a boring old boomer who sucks and like is lame. They've always sucked and they've always been awful, but like they look lame now.
Let's dive into the ways that it's sort of like going now, because I feel like you've done a good job of breaking down kind of how these memes are evolving and being weaponized in sort of these more esoteric spaces. I don't even know what to call. Is there like a name for this like weird movement on the internet of like the Agartha type stuff?
GQ did like a big list of like all the different Kirk memes flying around right now, and they called them Agarthan Charlie Kirk memes or Agarthan Charlie Kirk edits. That's probably as good as you're going to get, but there are a bunch of these that don't involve Charlie Kirk, and the whole thing predates him.
Well, so let's zoom back and talk about kind of like the evolution of that movement, because I feel like what we're seeing with the Agarthification of Charlie Kirk is, like you said, it's sort of this like movement that was a little bit before him that's kind of like taken him on now as like the face of their like digital content initiatives, I guess. Tell me a little bit about like kind of that faction of posters online and kind of where they emerged from.
So basically like Trump loses the election, you know, COVID has hit, Trumpism is feeling a little stale, especially like the whole like Pepe the Frog wave of it, right? And so in lockdown and immediately after, that sort of 2021 to 2022 period that people were sort of describing as like a far right vibe shift, you know, like all that silly stuff. What that really is a lot of different far right extremists experimenting with finding other forms of fascist iconography and imagery and symbolism that they can play with. And one of the most effective things they stumble across is like Nazi occultism, because it fits very well with the kind of new surreal brain rot that's becoming popular with Gen Z. So you start to see the Nazi black sun, Sonnenrad stuff pop up, and you start to see schizo wave edits and creepypasta about the Holocaust and this stuff about the lost city of Agartha that only white people can access at the center of the hollow earth. And I sound like a total maniac when I'm talking about this stuff, and you're supposed to. Like, the whole idea is like, what if you create a bunch of memes around the far right that can never be properly explained by people like you and me? Like, that we could never go on CNN and be like, okay, so like all these like racist teenagers on TikTok believe that like there's a secret city in the center of the earth. You know, like, that's ridiculous.
Also, I feel like you saw this increasingly like creeping out. You give some examples in your piece that you wrote for Garbage Day, but you talk about like in 2022, the mass shooter in Buffalo used weapons covered in references to these ideas, including that black sun symbol. There was a whole TikTok trend in 2023 you wrote where users were making aesthetic fan cams of Nazi Germany, fascist Italy, hoping to like dupe unsuspecting TikTok users into sharing them. And yeah, Ron DeSantis had an aide that had a Sonnenrad symbol in his videos. And I don't know if you've seen this recently, but I feel like Hitler's speeches translated to English have also become popular sounds on Reels.
Oh, that's interesting, because they were super popular on TikTok like 2 years ago. During that whole Fash Wave classical art fan edit era, they were also doing the AI translated speeches of Hitler. So, I mean, that just proves that like Meta products are 2 years behind like everything else, right? Oh, you guys just got AI translated Hitler? That's crazy. Like, welcome to Instagram. Yes, there is like a absolutely concerted effort from the top to spread this kind of content, but also this is a lot of people who are just messing around. Like, this is, I want to be really clear that like this is as conspiratorial as just like how like fascist stuff works. Like, it's not like there's one person being like, the hot new thing is the Sonnenrad. It's like they're experimenting with stuff, and it's very much like monkeys and typewriters and throwing stuff at the wall, the way it's always been.
Yeah. So after Kirk is shot, you wrote that, you know, this sort of imagery went into overdrive. Can you talk about how it kind of all fed together? Because I feel like really quickly now we started to see like a tsunami of these like Agartha, I guess, all white Charlie Kirk edits where like Charlie Kirk is also super blonde, like looks very Aryan.
Yeah, he gets an Agarthan makeover, basically. That's the idea, is that like you become blonde and blue-eyed when you go down into Agartha. The reason it's spreading right now, especially after Charlie Kirk's death, is basically what we kind of already talked about, which is that he is a sacred cow. You can attack him. You can piss off older people by doing it. In fact, I did a video about this, like a short little Reels like video being like, hey, like this is a thing, which it did get blocked from being uploaded to TikTok until I had to appeal, which I think is fascinating. But I had a couple people be like, oh, I thought these were funny and I liked them or I watched them, and then my feed filled up with like insane Nazi stuff. So like it's clearly being used as the tip of the spear on algorithmic platforms. So if they can make stuff that looks like it's making fun of Charlie Kirk, which they love doing because they hated him, then all of a sudden you're going to get hit with like hardcore neo-Nazi stuff. And that's happening on like every platform that has an algorithm.
Love it. Where do you see this kind of like evolving? Because I feel like there's also, I don't know, I mean, I feel like we've exhausted a lot of the Charlie Kirk formats. It's starting to slow down. Like, I think he's just going to enter into that sort of like eternal realm where he's always kind of like a present meme, but it's not like it's not like as funny as it was when you first saw it like a few weeks after his death or whatever. But do you think that Charlie Kirk as a figure will continue to be used by certain factions of the right, either as like somebody to mock or kind of as this example of kind of like cringe MAGA, like millennial lame conservatism?
Yeah, I might be wrong, but I sort of feel like the MAGA movement actually did die with Charlie Kirk, and we'll look back at it as like the moment like the whole thing kind of fell apart. The timing with the Epstein files, I think, also kind of added a bit to this. And in terms of like his meme status, I can't really think of a more fitting end for him than just become the next Harambe. Like, it'll be a thing where like every anniversary history, there'll be a wave of like offensive Charlie Kirk memes. And like every time the administration tries to like use his memory, there'll be a wave of people making fun of it. He's just like a meme now that like will cycle around the internet forever. Like probably the Gen Z equivalent of like making fun of 9/11 or the Gen Alpha equivalent.
It feels like that. I mean, when you look at the new movement that's arising in place of MAGA, because I agree with you, and I think MAGA is definitely like that classic MAGA is on the decline. How do you see those factions like evolving? And like, do you think that that sort of younger, more extreme Fuentes-led type movement is going to start gaining real political power?
I mean, according to conservatives in DC, yes. Like Rod Dreher, like the, you know, prominent conservative, wrote a whole Substack post about how he went to DC and every aide was like a genuine neo-Nazi who loved Nick Fuentes. So like that's already happening. Like the young part of the Republican Party are these people. They will have to do the hard work of like seeing if being a hardcore neo-Nazi is good for like getting voters, right? Like, is esoteric Nazi occultism a winning electoral strategy? Like, I don't really think it is. Maybe I'm naive, or optimistic about America. I just don't see it working that way. I think as long as we are in like a fair and open democracy, like these guys are not going to do well if they go and publicly like say what they believe.
I kind of agree with you, but also kind of like it is undeniable that they're pulling more people to the right. And like, you're right that if they go out and start talking about like Agartha or like doing those weird Nazi symbols, like, yeah, that's off-putting to a certain number of like normies. But I also just think a lot more like normie people are becoming pilled, and like the culture generally is becoming more reactionary and right-wing. And I think that's in large part because of the rise of these like that like super young, super extreme like faction on the internet.
You might be right. I might have rose-colored glasses because I just went home for Thanksgiving. But like this theory that I've been sort of sitting on and sort of had talked about, I sort of think the whole internet broke and like the average person doesn't care about any of this, and that like all of this stuff doesn't matter. I think like a decade of Trumpism has made the internet so ugly and inhospitable that like the average person isn't being red-pilled. Like I actually sort of think that like all internet discourse has no value anymore.
Oh my gosh, Ryan, you're coming off Thanksgiving. I'm coming off like 20 hours of watching this guy Clavicular, this Gen Z looks maxing kick streamer that I've been writing something about.
Oh yeah, I've been watching the looks maxing guys on TikTok. They're super funny. I think it's a bit.
I don't think it's a bit for this guy, but I agree. But I think you're right. Most of it is just kids going through puberty. But I don't know. I just don't know. Like the internet does remain like the most powerful communication tool of our time. And I do think that like, yeah, a lot of people are just like maxing out on brain rot shit and it's all kind of nothing, but it does feel like things have gotten further to the right.
I think American culture is the most right-wing it's been since the Bush administration. Like I think we are very much in like a post 9/11 media environment where everything is very conservative and very reactionary. And in fact, there is a version where like the Groyper wing of the MAGA movement moves us further to the right by allowing coverage for MAGA people to like join the Democrats and move the Democrats right. But also like a lot of sort of early, you know, primary stuff makes me think that that's not true. Like instead of trying to predict the future, what I will say is that like this stuff is popular to a point, but I think at a certain level of internet discourse, you become completely indecipherable to the average person. And that to me doesn't feel like it helps your political movement if you're just talking nonsense. Maybe I'm too old and naive, but like that's my thought.
No, I do think that like especially the like Charlie Kirk stuff, like that lore and all of those Agartha edits and all just the AI edits generally are so full of so many niche internet references. It is like you feel like you're looking at Italian brain rot or something where it's like you have to know every single kind of niche symbol to even understand what's happening in like the TikTok, and that is unscrutable to everybody over the age of 17 and like ultimately probably not like a winning way to kind of convince people of anything. And yeah, I think it's funny that Charlie Kirk's legacy, I guess, is ultimately just going to be as like a meme and a punchline. And I don't think any of those younger Charlie Kirk wannabes have gotten any traction either. I mean, do you think we'll see another sort of Charlie Kirk in our lifetime?
No, in fact, my pet theory was that like the major reaction we've seen mourning Charlie Kirk from the Trump administration and like prominent conservatives is that like he was their only hope for replacing Trump. Like JD Vance can never be Trump. Elon Musk can't even really do what Trump does. And I think that like a lot of ways, Charlie Kirk was grown in a laboratory to be this like influencer president replacement to the TV show president. And without him, they have nothing, because like that takes a long time. It's not going to be Tim Pool or Ben Shapiro or that kid whose name looks like a captcha, Bradland Holland or whatever. None of these people can do it. So like without that, they're going to have to run traditional Republicans who might not be totally on board with the whole taking over America thing, or they're going to have to run alt-right weirdos who don't know how to talk like normal people. Charlie Kirk was the only thing they had that kind of bridged that gap, and he's gone. Maybe Erika Kirk, but she's a woman. They would never do that.
No, they're not going to. Although I do think the first woman president is going to be right wing.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, that happened in the UK. So
do you think it's like problematic? I've seen a lot of scolding of people, especially in the past couple of weeks, like of making fun of Charlie Kirk and saying like, oh, this is being used as a tool for the right. Do you think it's a problem for leftists to share a few Charlie Kirk memes for fun?
I share them all the time. I think they're super funny. I think everything making fun of Charlie Kirk is super funny. All that said, there is no way to safely engage with any right-wing content on the internet right now without triggering that algorithmic effect. And that is just something you have to sort of take into account. If you're doing it on Blue Sky, you're probably fine. If you do it on X, you are absolutely probably going to trigger some kind of algorithmic cascade of neo-Nazi content for another user. Same with TikTok, same with Reels. Up to you, like whether you care about that. But like, so I was just having this conversation with June, who hosts the podcast Kill the Computer, about like irony cannot defeat irony. And like, it is so easy and it feels so good to like ironically share MAGA boomer slop and like talk like Trump and do all that stuff, but you are helping them. That is just a fact. And unfortunately, like being genuine and earnest seems like the best course of action, but like, God, that sucks and feels uncomfortable. But whatever. I think the average person is probably fine. Yeah, go for it.
Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today, and tell people where they can follow your work.
You can follow me at Garbage Day, garbageday.email. It's a newsletter I write. And we also have a podcast, Panic World. You can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. And you can also yell at me about the opinions I expressed here in this episode at Ryan Hates to Sell on Blue Sky or Broderick on X.
Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for the show. Don't forget to subscribe to my Patreon via the link below to support my work, or buy a paid subscription to my tech and online culture newsletter, UserMag, at usermag.co. That's usermag.co. On Substack, you can also get my newsletter via Patreon, where I post tons of behind the scenes content. I do a monthly live stream. You get a monthly bonus episode of Power User, and you're just helping to keep this show alive. I currently have no long-term brand partnerships at all, so truly every single dollar of your support ensures that I can continue to report on this stuff and do this work. So I cannot thank you enough. Click that Patreon link below, and I'll see you next week for a brand new episode of Power User. See you then.